Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Cliff Kirsch, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our special webcast on special needs financial planning. And again, thanks very much for tuning in. This is a special event for my wife, Terry, and me, and Terry's on today. And just 10 seconds about us and sort of why we're here today. Terry and I co-founded the Julie Kirsch Foundation, which is a nonprofit to serve individuals with disabilities and their families in the New Jersey, New York area. And recently, the foundation launched, together with William Paterson University, a disability resource hub. And the William Paterson University Disability Resource Hub has a lot planned, including over the next year, a couple of years of very exciting time, but including this first event of ours. Terry will talk more about the Disability Resource Hub in a bit, but just that by way of background. And also, before we start digging into today's panel, just a special thanks to my law firm, Eversheds, who has been very supportive of my efforts here. But also in particular, I want to thank Emily Johnson and Pamela Wimmer, who's behind the scenes and just pulled this whole program together and just always help in a number of different ways. So special thanks to Emily and Pamela. With that, why don't we turn to the next slide and just give you a sense so you could see our speakers. And one of the things that's been nice is getting to know our speakers, and again, a special thanks for having them here. Let me ask Liz to first introduce herself, and then Judy, I'll ask you to introduce yourself. So Liz?
Sure. I'm Liz Yoder. I'm the Director of Financial Planning at Planning Across the Spectrum. So my main role is walking with families and individuals to understand their financial lives so that we can design a financial plan with the best intentions to support a supported individual in the future. That's my main role within my company. I was introduced to this work through advocacy. I lived in as a caregiver in a group home for 3 years, and just discovered how many families didn't have the answers they needed to understand what they could do with money, and found that no one was teaching this information. So I had to learn from the ground up kind of financial planning, and then on top of it, the special needs element to make sure that I understood how to communicate the needs of our clients to them.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for being here. And it's been great connecting with you. So when we started trying to put this program together, I was looking for sort of the expertise, and so many people pointed me, Liz, to you and your colleague, Andrew. So thanks so much. I really got that referral, like just from a number of different folks. So thanks for being here. And I also wanted to introduce Judy Weinstock. Judy is an assistant director at the SEC's New York office. And a lot of us know the SEC for the rules they put out, the regulations that they do, the cases that they bring, in terms of the financial sector. But another thing that they do is resources, community outreach. And as part of that, we're absolutely delighted to have Judy as part of this. And Judy, maybe I could ask you to say a couple of words about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cliff. I'm really pleased to be part of this presentation today. As you said, I'm an assistant director in the SEC's New York regional office in the Division of Enforcement. And I'm also chairperson of the New York Regional Office's Investor Outreach Committee. We do dozens of events a year for all different populations, including affinity groups such as this one. As I mentioned to Cliff, I cherry-picked this event for myself specifically as a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, as the wife of an individual with a disability and the mother of a special needs child. So I'm really pleased to be here today, and I hope to share a ton of information about the resources that the SEC has, consistent with our mission of investor protection.
Yeah, great, Judy, and it's been great getting to know you. Thanks for doing this and being part of this. We're delighted to have you as part of that. And before we dig into the material, I was hoping Terry could give a little bit about herself. But if we go to the next slide, we could mention a little bit about the Disability Resource Hub.
Hi, I'm Terry Brabbacher. I'm the president of the Julie Anne Kirsch Foundation and the William Paterson University Disability Resource Hub's ambassador. The William Paterson University Disability Resource Hub was launched in May of 2022 in partnership with the Julie Anne Kirsch Foundation. And what the hub does is it provides information and guidance to help families understand the variety of resources that are available to them from government and other sources and how they can obtain them. The hub also guides families in connection with various issues that arise as families plan for their children's future care and financial considerations. The hub works with families via online information, individual consultations, group seminars, and other sessions. For more information about the hub, please see our website. And also, if you want to contact the hub about anything from today or you have any other questions that arise, you can reach us at resourcehub@wpunj.edu, and someone will get back to you very shortly with hopefully some answers. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Terry. All righty, why don't we get into today? And on the next slide, just a little bit of what we're hoping to accomplish is really to introduce in this webcast the concept of financial planning and the importance of financial planning, but also, special considerations with, regarding special needs financial planning. And, from there, and that's going to be, Liz taking the lion's share of that discussion. From there, we're going to turn to Judy, who'll talk about, just as she mentioned, the resources that are out there and that the SEC makes available with respect to special needs financial planning. And with all this, I should note, like the handoffs won't be crisp. We're really just going through this material in a way, in an introductory way. I wish I could say in 40 minutes or 50 minutes, we'll have 4 actionable items that'll be easy to follow, and then you're set, and all this stuff. And if any of us out there who are special needs parents know, it's just all a journey. I mean, there's just an awful lot to do, consider. And, we just want to be a resource here. And again, just with this one, really throw out some considerations, knowing that you should feel comfortable to follow up with us as you have questions and for more. And with that, Liz, can I turn it to you to take your part of the discussion in terms of what are some of the considerations with respect to planning, financial planning with respect to families with individuals who have special needs? Hey, Liz, you're there, Liz?
Yes, thank you. So we have our presentation here called Supported Financial Planning for When Parents Are Gone. So a lot of the times we find that the planning that we do with our families are really looking into the future, far beyond when a family would typically look at. A typical financial plan would start around a retirement. We aren't just focusing on a retirement when we're looking at special needs planning, we're looking at a retirement and beyond. So a family's personal retirement and their child's life beyond themselves. Sometimes we expect that a child will have a much longer lifetime than their parents. Usually we assume that, and sometimes not. But we always want to make sure that the plan, that there is a plan in place to be looking at what are the questions that you should be asking when you have someone that you're supporting. So what are we going to cover? So why is planning important? What are the documents and accounts you need to be aware of? And some ideas on developing a team of support. So of course, why is planning so important? Because you're protecting things that are unique to your family. And one of the things that might be unique to your family are government benefits. So we wanted to give a review on government benefits to make sure everybody is clear on all the different pieces that we have to talk about. Social Security is the money base that people receive when there's disability. So there's Supplemental Security Income, which is SSI. That's the program that's based on a financial need that is a poverty relieving program. And then there's a Social Security disability insurance, which is linked specifically to somebody's working record. The final is a disabled adult child benefit, which is similar to SSDI, but it's a benefit that's received by a parent's work record for a child or for an adult child. The other benefits that we talk about are medical benefits, including Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid, again, is similar to SSI and often received at the same time, but not always. Medicaid is a resource-bound plan where people typically have to prove that they don't have very many assets or income. And Medicare is a plan that we typically talk about for retirees, people after 65, but it's also part of the planning when we have someone who has SSDI or the disabled adult child benefit. Housing is another government benefit. We're looking at the Section 8 housing or group homes, supported living, but also living with parents and family. Not everyone has to think about group homes or supported living, and it's actually part of our DNA as a company to understand what it looks like for someone to live in a group home and things to look out for, things to be aware of, how it can be a significant financial benefit. Well, it's a significant relief of what you would otherwise be paying if there is a housing support program that you're able to take advantage of, such as a Medicaid waiver or some other kind of low-income housing support program. So again, supplemental security income is that SSI is the pays disabled workers and individuals who are unable to work at a significant amount, which typically is that substantial gainful activity number that the government issues as $1,350 a month of earned income, and who have limited income and resources. This is the SSI here. So that's below that. That's the benefit of last resort. If there's any other financial benefit that a family can receive or an individual can receive, SSI is then the income from the other program offsets often the SSI. And if SSDI is part of the picture for this individual, it would be offset $1 for dollar. A lot of the time when we meet with people, they don't understand what benefit they're on, and they're just saying, oh, I have Social Security. And we have to kind of parse out, okay, when did you receive it and how much is it, so we can understand what benefit it actually is. A lot of the people that we meet with who are older or who have retired parents actually are receiving an SSDI benefit, not SSI. So they're no longer bound by the asset limits of the SSI program if they're just receiving income payments. So the Ssdi program pays benefits to disabled individuals regardless of their income and resources. It's a benefit that was earned through payment to Social Security from a worker's history, whether that be the worker themselves, the person with the disability themselves, or their parent. So SSI and Medicaid are typically tied pretty well together, and they're tied also in the fact that they're both financially means tested. You have to have limited assets and income, and there's a time and place where parental deeming stops. So for SSI, there's a parent's income is looked at completely before age 18 as part of a child's use. That they assume that a parent of a under 18-year-old will be supporting their child with the income that they're receiving. At age 18, that's no longer the assumption. So then that's when we see that people are applying and should apply for benefits of SSI so that they can be just looking at their own income. In-kind support and maintenance may still reduce the SSI benefit. If someone is living with their parent, for example, we always recommend that a rental agreement be looked at to see if it makes sense for the family, so that either the individual pays rent so that their benefits increase, or they don't pay rent so that the family's kind of bottom line doesn't get out of balance. Sometimes it makes sense to not create a rental agreement to take the less benefit, and sometimes it makes much more sense to write the rental agreement and have the child's benefit, the adult child's benefit, as it should be, which is the max amount is $841. SSI is the gateway to Medicaid, so typically we encourage people to get on SSI because it becomes more able to, the person becomes more able to receive Medicaid for disability benefits, but not always. Some people are able to use Medicaid prior to receiving SSI. Ssdi is linked to Medicare. So again, Medicare, like Ssdi, is not financially means tested. There are no asset limits. There's no reduction of Ssdi for in-kind maintenance and support. And Medicare coverage comes in after 2 years of waiting with Ssdi coming to a family. When someone receives Ssdi and Medicare, which is often, again, when parents retire or are starting to draw Social Security benefits, and there's that 2-year wait, we see that Ssdi and Medicare may be enough for an individual to no longer be worried about the means tests. And it's a completely different planning world when they have both those and they don't need to rely on Medicaid programming. Now, Medicaid program is always the trickiest part because we want to protect that programming as much as possible for people who need it, particularly the housing supports and particularly whatever is most meaningful to an individual. It's not just health insurance we're hoping to protect. It's the additional supports that come from the waivers within each state. So Medicare, again, is the federally funded and nationwide coverage program. Medicaid is a federally and state funded and has specific rules that apply to each state. Most are benefiting our group of people with disabilities. Many cover additional prescription drug coverage, and many offer outpatient and inpatient hospital coverage. Okay, so now that we've covered benefits, how can you be financially prepared? So one of the things that we always talk about when it comes to benefits is that people who have a disability prior to the age of 26 are able to contribute to an ABLE account. An ABLE account is one of those tools that allows someone to have more money to their name than the asset limits. So it's it's protecting the SSI and Medicaid benefits, as well as some other programs, including the EBT or food stamps programs of each state. It doesn't protect all benefits. Some of the housing not waivers, but some of the housing Section 8 programming specifically to each state might be a little different and complex. So you want to make sure that the housing itself does not cause problems where the ABLE assets are still being included in the accountable resources. But when you use an ABLE account, it's to protect those benefits, the SSI and Medicaid. Contributions are made post-tax by any person. It doesn't have to be the person themselves. They can be gifts into the ABLE. It's just one account for each Social Security number. So it's not like a college savings account where you can have grandma have an account and mom have an account and brother have an account for one person. It's just one person, the person with a disability, and it's their account, and different people can contribute to it. There are some states that if you use their program, there is a tax deduction, but it's not a federal tax deduction. It's a state tax deduction. And and the investments can grow tax-free for qualified expenses, which are pretty much anything under the sun that a person with a disability would need to make their lives better. ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and it was designed in order to encourage people and enable people to have more than the asset-limited amounts of $2,000 in their name to receive Social Security and Medicaid. Prior to this, people had to spend money in order to stay on these programs, whether they needed to or not. The ABLE account allows people to save money and start to build up their own emergency fund without removing their personal access to making decisions within the account. This is why we often will encourage people who don't have SSI and Medicaid to still have an ABLE account. If someone has a disability that was determined before 26, and they want to have a savings account and spending account that they are in control of and is not put into a trust, the ABLE account is a way for them to still have that resource and to empower them to be in control of that money. Now, they don't have to be in control of the money, but it is their account. Other people can help them with it, but it is how people can have money outside of a trust, not rely on a trustee, and still have savings and expenses that they can control beyond the 2,000 limits of the benefit programs. We discussed some of this already. Why one might be necessary is to protect SSI, SNAP, and Medicaid. If people get letters from Social Security saying you have too much money, just move money into an ABLE, and then they can either reinstate benefits or correct the over counting of assets where they will not cancel benefits because the money is in an ABLE. All right. So every situation is unique. When we talk to our families, they have their communities of support, whether it be their brother or the family group. And someone will say, my son, it took him 3 years to apply for SSDI and he got denied, and we had to go through this appeal process and we had to do this, that, and the other. And still he's waiting to have his determination letter. We hear stories like this all the time that make people worried to apply for benefits. Your story is different than your brother's, than your cousin's, than your friend who is a good advisor in a lot of ways and who you've learned a lot from in your parent groups. But make sure that you seek out the proper support, someone who understands the exact situation that you live in and that applies to your family. Sometimes someone's eligible for SSDI sooner than you know that they are. Sometimes the disability is different, and that it'll be a much easier time for your son or daughter than someone else's son or daughter to get an approval letter. You just can't listen to the stories of others to determine your own decisions. It has to be based on your own personal story. We try to make it as easy as possible to clarify all the noise, and that a plan is always the why are you doing things is always the most important. Not looking at the tools individually and what could be done, but why are we setting something up? What is the most important thing? And then trying to address those things. We have to take into the consideration of how much money is needed. When we are building financial plans, we want to make sure that we're not overfunding a trust. Some people have the belief that they have to send everything to their son or daughter who has a disability without understanding that there's Medicaid waivers that they'll be eligible for, that they'll have their SSDI payment for the remainder of their life, that there are other things that are given to children, adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities that aren't going to be given to their other sons or daughters who struggle. It's important to look at what is the need and then understand who actually needs the money more. Sometimes it's the child who is struggling to find his own way but doesn't have a disability. Taxes matter. When planning for financial affairs, you always want to make sure that your decisions are tax efficient and that you're not spending more on taxes than you have to. It erodes what's going to be left to your children. It erodes the planning for the future generation. And you want to make sure that whoever's working with you is able to advise on ways to eliminate unnecessary taxes for your own planning and for the future plan. Are we planning for the proper time horizon? If you know that your son or daughter is going to have a shorter life based on their life expectancy, for example, I think someone with Down syndrome is expected to have a shorter life, but we still say, we still look at the oldest person with Down syndrome in our planning. We don't expect a person with Down syndrome to live to 90. It's more likely that they live into their 70s. And so we want to make sure that we don't say, okay, we look at your family's planning and then we add 60 years. That's not reasonable. So we want to make sure that the planning horizon is proper. So this is my friend Andrew, who couldn't join us today. He's a jokester. He says taxation is theft on his shirt. But we often will talk about one of the ways you can plan for tax efficiency is making sure that retirement money and IRAs are efficiently gifted. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So if there's a beneficiary that can receive an asset that can be received outright as opposed to in a trust, sometimes that makes sense to look at to see where will it be taxed the most. Recent tax law changes, again, have eliminated some of or have clarified stretch laws for disabled individuals so that people with disabilities can receive an IRA and stretch out the payments that they would be receiving. But then that IRA is also then included within their countable resources. So whether it go into a trust or be left to somebody else is a real big question. We often encourage people to look at their final beneficiaries when they are expecting their estate plan to rework who it might receive a IRA, because the complexity of a trust receiving an IRA might not be worth it, but neither is the idea of someone with a disability receiving an IRA that disqualifies them for Medicaid services. So it's a real question towards the end of a parent's life of who should receive the IRA, if not their son or daughter, if not the trust. There's plenty of planning to be done to make sure that that asset doesn't get overtaxed, the asset as in the retirement account, and that it doesn't corrode the planning for the future individual. So there's just so much more complexity to leaving assets to a beneficiary than just leaving it in the trust. We make this comment, we're talking about retirement accounts and not housing because we know that some of our audience may be in New York and IRAs are housing in disability occasionally in New York. So I wanted to make sure that this is individual retirement accounts and not the housing. Okay, so how can you be legally prepared? So the biggest thing is just consider a special needs trust. We know that a special needs or a supplemental needs trust is built and designed to protect the assets that you're leaving to your son or daughter in your estate plan. It's used to supplement and not replace public benefits so that the public benefits are still being received. And it's created by changes to the Medicaid law. It's highly dependent on the states that you're building it, on what the legalese should be in each document. So it's always important to have it reviewed where you intend to live, where you intend to die, possibly, and have it reviewed regularly to make sure that anything that you put in the trust, anything that you write into the code of the trust is reviewed to make sure that the current situation is still the same. We do encourage people to revisit their special needs trusts on a regular basis with their attorney, and particularly with an attorney who understands the flexibility that you might need for your son or daughter who may or may not be on benefits when they are older and needing the trust assets. So there are multiple different kinds of special needs trusts. This is a 90s reference, if you all remember the mask. The first party trust is more restrictive and has payback provisions to the Medicaid support systems that people will use if they are supported individuals. This is their money that they're putting into a trust to protect an inheritance or benefits that they're receiving, including child support. First party trust, again, is the person with the disability's money to protect for receiving benefits. A third party trust is much more flexible and doesn't have as much court oversight, with no payback provision to Medicaid support systems. The third party trust is funded by someone other than the person with the disability and can be multiple people who have left money into a third party trust for an individual with a disability. So we always ask, who is the best person to fund a trust? Someone else. There's not always ways to avoid that, but if there are benefits that are being received that someone needs to create a special needs trust for themselves, the first party, that sometimes is needed. But we want to make sure that if you can plan for a third party trust, that you do. So the general documents always within an estate plan, your own and your child's, are wills, powers of attorney, advance directives, letter of intent, and living wills. Your child may not have assets that they're leaving to others, but they might want to name somebody as a power of attorney, as a medical decision maker if they're no longer able to make decisions for themselves. And so don't neglect those documents for your child just because they have you in their lives right now. Make sure that they codify that into their own planning as well. The letter of intent many people have heard about is just that, making sure that you're communicating what the needs are of your son or daughter, making sure that you define the lifestyle that you want to encourage them to have with the money that you leave to them, and to make sure that the future person caring and supporting for them knows all of the important people in their lives, so that there's less disruption in someone's life when you're gone. All right, so building the support network. Caregiver stress? No. Why do you ask? We always know that our parents and caregivers are some of the most stressed individuals, not because of the need to support, but the need to have their own support. Not everybody has a support network to make sure that they're doing okay. And we always want to make sure that you have as many people on your team supporting you, supporting your child, so that you don't have to be the only one. Care teams are an important part of any special needs individual's financial future. If you can set them up before you're gone, again, before you have an incapacity yourself, then your son or daughter or loved one will know who to go to because they've already been going to them. Whether that means having coffee with someone from church or having someone else understand what the medical appointments look like before you need to no longer be there. It's just something always that we recommend, and something that's always a challenge to find the time and space, but will always make the transition better for the person that you're caring for. It's important to make sure that caregivers are planning for their own financial future. It's not enough to just say, we're taking care of our son or daughter. We don't want to bankrupt a family because they're protecting their son or daughter. We always want to make sure, and that does happen when we're looking at plans. We see people worried about their children ending up homeless or using programs that aren't going to be the best for them. Well, if you're paying too much for them and it's not helpful to your own retirement plan, then you won't be able to protect them now or when you're gone in the way that you would want to. So it's always important to make sure that the health of the financial plan starts with the parents. And preparation by caregivers leads to financial independence for their dependents. When you can put your own life in order, your financial life, you can better serve the needs of your children's as well. So who can manage the money, the financial assets, when a family is no longer around, when parents are gone? But specialty trusts companies exist that focus on special needs, and many don't do special needs at all. So we want to make sure that when you are talking with a trust company, that you know exactly what you're getting. There are companies that say that they provide trust support, but they don't understand autism. They don't understand disability. They just know how to manage assets. That's never what you want to do when you have a child who might be dependent on a trust company, a trustee for their future needs. You want to make sure that your trust company can manage property. If you're leaving your home to your son or daughter, you want to make sure that they're able to either use that home or sell that home and buy a new home within the trust asset. If the trust company can't manage the property itself or any other real estate that you have in your life, it won't be a good fit for the plan that you create. The trust companies will be able to help you organize everything and put things into place ahead of time. And you want to make sure that they have people on staff who are educated in disability. And when we think about disability, and especially with neurodiversity, we also think about gender diversity as well. We want to make sure that people are able to speak to the things that your children, that people actually need, that they can speak to the mental health, they can speak to everything. So we don't expect a banker would be able to do that. We expect someone like a social worker to be able to do that. I'm going to wrap up very quickly. The most important thing that you can do is to plan now and not wait for planning. You cannot fix things when you're gone. You have to fix things before then. So consider how many hours a week you spend on caring for your loved one. Make sure you find people who can share in those responsibilities. Delegate as much as possible to professionals who can take on those small roles for you, even before you're gone. And don't burden siblings or other family members out of guilt if you can. There are other people who can take on roles of responsibility outside of family who can serve an individual in a good way. Especially don't listen to recommendations for friends, because they might not have the same situation as your family, and you never know what their situation is. Think about your goals, where you want to go, and how you are going to get there. And that is our presentation.
Yeah, that was great, Liz. Thanks. Thanks so much. As I mentioned, I wish we could sort of say, here's 4 easy steps and then you're set, but you threw out so much, and that's realistic. And it's just something that, a lot to consider. 2 quick points. Number one, you started off by talking about resources that are available, and just a quick mention, and that was terrific. The William Patterson Resource Hub page reinforces some of that and has brief reference guides on some of that. So if for folks listening who want to tap into that, please feel free to. And also to note that we'll make a recording of this available for folks who want to take this in, just because there's so much here. And with that, what I'd like to do is pivot to Judy. What Liz had mentioned is the importance of financial planning and thinking about planning. What resources are available, Judy, from the SEC end of things that could help families think through some of the things that Liz was referencing?
So Cliff, I'm going to talk about some themes today. I'm going to talk about avoiding fraud. I'm going to talk a little bit about the costs of investing, financial planning, and pretty much everything I'm going to say today is located on the SEC's website, investor.gov. And I think Pamela is going to help me put up some of the links. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those themes, and we'll take a look at how investor.gov can help people. So I want to thank you again, Cliff, for having me here. I feel honored and privileged to be here. Given my work at the SEC, I'm especially passionate about the importance of saving and investing for the future, and I empathize with the unique needs of this community when it comes to financial planning. At the SEC, I see firsthand the resources that the SEC provides on these topics. And today I plan to talk to you about those resources. But before I go any further, I have to give the SEC disclaimers. The SEC disclaims responsibility for any private publication or statement of any SEC employee or commissioner. The views I express today are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of the commission, the commissioners, or the staff. In addition, the SEC's New York office is providing this information as a service to investors. This presentation is not a statement of official SEC policy, a legal interpretation, or investment advice. As Cliff mentioned, the SEC has a 3-part mission: to protect investors, to maintain fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and to facilitate capital formation. Today, what I hope to accomplish is part of the investor protection mission to encourage you to save and invest for the long term and to avoid fraud. Sometimes people decide to work with an investment professional if they're very busy, for example. They may want to hire a broker or an investment advisor. The SEC regulates brokers and investment advisors. The most important question that you should consider before hiring a broker or an investment advisor is whether the person is registered with the SEC or with a state securities regulator. You should always check the background of any financial professional to make sure the person is licensed. It is very risky to invest with someone who is not licensed, and we urge you not to do it. Unlicensed, unregistered persons commit much of the investment fraud in the United States. The SEC makes it easy to learn about an investment professional's background. Investor.gov has a free and simple search tool that allows you to find out if your investment professional is licensed and registered. So I asked Pamela to put in the name Jordan Belfort for me because Mr. Belfort is the subject of the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, who probably a lot of you are familiar with. And you see, if you put in Jordan Belfort's name, he comes up as barred by FINRA or the SEC. So you know right away this person has been barred by FINRA or the SEC. Let's talk about fees for a minute. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Investment advisors and brokers do not perform their services as an act of charity. If they're working for you, they get paid for their efforts. Some of their fees are easier to see immediately than are others. In all cases, you should always feel free to ask questions about how and how much your advisor or broker is being paid. And if the fee is quoted to you as a percentage, make sure you understand what that translates to in dollars. The fees impact your investment, so it's important that you understand them. Here are some questions that you can ask about an investment professional's compensation. Questions might include, how do you get paid? By commission? How are commissions determined? Do they vary depending on the amount of assets you manage? Do you get paid through means other than through commissions and amount of assets you manage? And if yes, how? Do I have any choice as to how to pay you? Are there ways I can reduce or avoid some of the fees I'll pay, such as by purchasing the investment directly? These fees may seem small, but over time, they can have a major impact on your investment portfolio. For the investment, you can ask, what are the total fees to purchase, maintain, and sell this investment? How much does this investment have to increase in value before I break even? Asset allocation. While the SEC cannot recommend any particular investment product, you should know that a vast array of investment products exist, including stocks and mutual funds, corporate and municipal bonds, bond mutual funds, life cycle funds, exchange-traded funds, money market funds, and U.S. Treasury securities. Asset allocation and diversification are investment techniques that can help investors reduce risk and volatility in their portfolio. Asset allocation is how to divide an investment portfolio among different assets, such as stocks, bonds, and cash. Diversification involves spreading your investments among different investment products, including within each of your portfolio's asset categories. The asset allocation and diversification that works best for you at any given point in your life will depend largely on your time horizon. That is, how long until you expect to want to sell the investment, and your ability to tolerate risk. Generally speaking, the longer you have to invest before you will need your money, the more risk you can afford to take on. Your money can really grow using the power of compound interest. The SEC has a tool to calculate compound interest over time on our website, investor.gov. And this is the compound interest calculator right here. The SEC has various free financial planning tools. They're at the SEC's website, Free Financial Planning Tools, which is, again, on investor.gov. FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, has something called a mutual fund analyzer. This offers information and analysis on over 18,000 mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, and exchange-traded notes. This tool estimates the value of the funds and the impact of fees and expenses on your investment, and also allows you the ability to look up applicable fees and available discounts for funds. And this you can find on finra.org. So I want to encourage you to invest for the long term. So some tips for investing wisely for the long term. Know your time horizon and keep your long-term financial objectives in mind. Remember that information you read online about specific investments can often reflect short-term trends. Don't let short-term emotions get in the way of your long-term financial goals. Real-time discussion platforms and social sentiment may lead you to make emotionally driven or impulsive investment decisions. Use caution when investing based on social media. Take the time to do your own independent research and never feel pressure to invest right away. Investor.gov has alerts on red flags that an investment is fraud, such as claims of high returns with little or no risk, unregistered investment professionals, aggressive sales tactics, no net worth or income requirements, and unsolicited investment offers. Don't let fear of missing out get the best of you. For example, Some investors may have fear of missing out given the rise in price of some digital assets in recent years, that they will miss an opportunity to become very wealthy. If you're considering a digital asset-related investment, take the time to understand how the investment works and to evaluate its risks. There are substantial risks you should consider if you are considering investments in crypto assets. First, these are relatively new and untested investments. Even Bitcoin is only 10 years old. Novel investments with limited track records often have additional risk. Second, cryptocurrencies are speculative. Buyers are hoping someone will pay more for the assets than they did, but must recognize there's a significant chance they could lose their money. That makes them different than, for example, a share of a stock in a company that has revenue streams, customers, warehouses, software, trucks, etc. Those things represent more intrinsic value, not merely speculative value. Also keep in mind that digital investments don't generally have the same level of regulation and therefore investor protection as you would expect in investments like stocks, bonds, funds, and 401ks. And that's an increased risk as it relates to digital investments. I want to say a few words about affinity fraud. Affinity frauds target members of identifiable groups, such as the elderly or religious or ethnic communities. The fraudsters involved in affinity scams are or often pretend to be members of the group. They may enlist respected leaders from that group to spread the word about the scheme, convincing them it's legitimate and worthwhile. Many times those leaders may become unwitting victims of the fraud that they help to promote. These scams exploit the trust and friendship that exist in groups of people. Because of the tight-knit structure of many groups, outsiders may not know about the affinity scam. Victims may try to work things out within the group rather than notify authorities or pursue legal remedies. Affinity scams often involve Ponzi or pyramid schemes, where new investor money is used to pay back or pay interest to earlier investors, making it appear as if the investment is successful and legitimate. There are two SEC enforcement cases that I'd like to mention here. The first one was the case that the SEC brought on May 2nd, 2022. In this case, the SEC announced fraud charges against an entity and an individual for allegedly defrauding individuals with disabilities into believing that the individuals were placing their funds in a pooled trust managed by a nonprofit association. According to the SEC's charges, the defendants instead used a nonprofit trustee as a shell company to profit from disabled personal injury victims. So the takeaway here is that sometimes fraudsters prey on victims by convincing them that they're investing in something close to their heart and or that there's a charitable aspect to their investment. In another case, the SEC charged an individual with conducting a multi-million-dollar online offering fraud that victimized thousands of retail investors, including hundreds of investors from the deaf, hard of hearing, and hearing loss communities. At least 847 of these investors invested more than $2 million in the company, which was called Eastern Metal Securities, as their retirement investment. In this case, the SEC alleged that the investment was unregistered. Not only should you research your investment professional, but you should also research your investment. Any offer or sale of securities must either be registered with the SEC or exempt from registration. Otherwise, it is illegal. While many companies that do not register or file reports with the SEC may be exempt from registration, you assume more risk when you invest in a company about which little or no information is publicly available. You should always check whether an offering is registered with the SEC by using the SEC's EDGAR database, or by contacting the SEC's toll-free investor assistance line at 800-732-0330, 800-732-0330. So I talked about investor.gov. The SEC also has a website called sec.gov. And Pamela has up here the Edgar database. And this is how you can look for a company to see if the offering is registered with the SEC. What happens if, despite all of your research, you do fall victim to a scam? If you believe you have been the victim of a financial fraud, you should report it to the SEC. The SEC maintains a tip, complaint, and referral system to allow members of the public to report suspected investment fraud. This TCR system can be found at www.sec.gov/TCR. If you can't access our online form, you can reach out to the SEC with that same number I gave you before, 1-800-732-0330, or you can email us at help@sec.gov. After you submit your tip to the SEC, SEC staff evaluate the information and tips concerning these potential violations of the federal securities laws. I hope the information I provided you today will help you build a stronger financial future. Please take your time, do your research, and have a critical eye when it comes to investing your hard-earned money. Always ask questions, advocate for yourself and your family. And again, if you'd like more information, a great resource is investor.gov. Before I wrap up, I would like to invite you to reach out to the SEC's New York office. You can reach out to me directly. My email address is weinstockj@sec.gov. If you would like a presentation such as this, as I mentioned when I introduced myself, the New York office of the SEC has an investor outreach committee, and we take this presentation on the road, and we present for various affinity groups, for schools, for teachers, members of the military, religious organizations, and we'd be happy to do such a presentation for your organization. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, Judy, thanks for all of that. That you gave us a lot to think about, and thanks for bringing us closer to the SEC resources, and also for that kind offer at the end. So thanks very much. And we could wrap up where we began. First, thanks everyone to the folks who tuned in. We appreciate it, and we hope to get to know you over time as you digest this and reach out with questions for this and other topics that we'll be covering. A special thanks to Liz and Judy for presenting the material that they did, for walking us through these considerations. It was tremendously helpful. And for Terry for introducing us to the William Patterson University Disability Resource Hub. And again, we hope to get to see and know the folks out there. And also thanks again to Pam and Emily for pulling everything behind the scenes. We appreciate your effort. And with that, we'll wrap it up. And again, thanks very much.